Welcome to Southwest Florida Real Estate Update, hosted by area realtor Jim York and York Real Estate Group of Downing Fry Realty. Our show will bring you the most up-to-date information about the local real estate market, featuring leading experts in the real estate field.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Southwest Florida Real Estate Update. I'm Michael York with the York Real Estate Group, and I'm joined today by our host Jim York and his guest Don Ross of Ross Title and Escrow.
Thank you, Michael, for the introduction. We're here again with Don Ross with our legal tip of the month.
Glad to be here.
Don, for people that haven't seen the show or haven't viewed it before, maybe you could just give us a short, brief background about yourself and your office.
Okay. Well, I've been a member of the Florida Bar since 1982. I'm a shareholder in Ross, Lanier & Dyfick, a law firm, sole shareholder in title company, Ross Title, and I'm a shareholder in Downing Fry Realty. Been practicing in real estate for 30 years plus.
Okay. In your offices, where are they located?
5901 Tamiami Trail, across the street from Pastrami Dan's for all the male members of the audience. 2 blocks north of the Naples Community Hospital, except we're on 41.
Right. And it's on the 3rd floor.
Third floor.
So, Don, we're here for, I think, a very important topic. And October 3rd, our government enacted a new bill called the Dodd-Frank, and it really affects everyone, realtors, closing agents, banks, and mostly the consumer also. So what I'd like you to do is maybe, and during the show, we can cover the different hot topics that maybe we need to look at with all these changes that have occurred just recently, October 3rd. First one, what is the new name of a closing statement?
Well, the new closing statement is called a closing disclosure, and the bank is now the one that issues it, not the title company or the law firm, and they're supposed to issue it to the consumer. That's the new term now for a buyer, a consumer, 3 days prior to the closing. It's a 5-page document.
And what was it, how many days before before this? Was it 3 days or 2 days?
It's 3 days before, and they've also replaced the good faith estimate, which in the past was 3 days after the buyer would apply for the loan. They've replaced that with a loan estimate, which is 3 pages long. So you have a 3-page document that's required to be provided to the consumer 3 days after they apply for the loan, and then you have the closing disclosure, which is now 5 pages. It takes the place of what we refer to as the HUD of the closing statement now, and it is to be issued by the lender instead of the closing company, which is a huge change.
Yeah, that's a huge change.
Huge change.
So it's going to come from the bank or the mortgage company. We won't be getting it from you.
No, you and I will be working with our buyers to please get the information to the bank so the bank can please get the closing disclosure to the consumer or the buyer 3 business days prior to closing. Back in the day, I would be called, my title company would be called for a preliminary closing statement, and we would produce one. We actually have an app where consumers or buyers, I have a hard time with some of these new names. To me, they're still buyers, regardless of what the government says. But we do have an app where you can put in your numbers and give something to your customer, your buyer, so they have some vague idea what it's going to cost when they're signing a contract. And again, if you have your team, you have your lender that you can get on the phone, and they can get something together pretty quickly as well.
But before, they did give a good faith estimate before.
They gave a good faith estimate before. I thought it was actually fine, honestly.
I did too.
They do it for cars, for anything that's financed, including real estate. Barney Frank and Christopher Dodd, former members of Congress, sponsored this bill. It was actually passed in 2010, and it covers not only real estate, it covers credit cards, and a variety of other financial procedures. So it's incredibly comprehensive, and it's meant to, believe it or not, make things clearer to the consumer.
Yeah, that's what I heard. It's to make things clear so they can shop understand what different mortgages or different banks are offering, right?
They're going to give them more pages to make it clearer. So, you know, none of us really know how effective this is going to be because, as you mentioned, the effective date was October 3rd, and we haven't actually had closings yet where this law was being followed. We will see those first closings probably in 30, 45 days. And then we'll see how clear it was or is to the consumer. And probably 6 months out, we'll have a better idea on how effective this really is. Because it's a huge change, you know, banks, title companies, law firms, and realtors.
You know, the key thing is for the people that are watching the show is that everyone really has to be on the same page and everyone has to be really organized where, you know, they get insurance quotes up front, get your inspections, you know, get your surveys, right, and your elevation certificates up front or very early in the process. Application for for community development or homeowners associations, et cetera, right?
It's more important. I know we've emphasized this on prior shows, the importance of having a team, an educated team, an experienced team, but you really need to have a good team now, a team that's able to communicate, a team where you can reach somebody by cell. It has so many ripples throughout the process. It makes past things that we've discussed, for example, the problems you sometimes run into with out-of-state banks.
Right.
Well, I mean, if you have to have a tightly knit team now, more so by some unknown factor than ever before, imagine how difficult it will be to get something closed on time if the lender is out of state and they're not part of the team and you don't have that person's cell number. And that person is the one who's issuing the closing disclosure, some bank in Michigan. And again, there's exceptions, there's always exceptions, and maybe it'll work tremendously well. But from my experience with the old closings, I'm optimistically skeptical, I guess would be the phrase. It's not uncommon now to get closing figures the day of closing. So how they're going to all of a sudden get it a 5-page disclosure 3 days prior, I hope it works out. I really do. But
Don, we're going to take a little short break and we're going to be right back in 1 minute.
Thinking of buying a home located in a golf course community in the Naples, Marco, Bonita, or Estero, Florida? Here is what Mark Lai, former PGA winner, says about Realtor Michael York of the York Real Estate Group of Downing Fry Realty.
Hi, I'm Mark Lai. If you have any real estate needs in Naples, Florida, the one company to contact is the York Real Estate Group. Also, if you want a golf course property to invest in, Michael York of the York Real Estate Group is the guy to contact. Michael knows every golf course in Naples. I will tell you this, he's been in the golf business for a long time. He's played all the great golf courses down here, and he is an outstanding realtor. I've known him for quite some time, and he's he's got a lot of integrity, and he very much knows his stuff on all the different clubs here in Naples. So the York Real Estate Group is a great place to start. So if you have any time or anybody that wants to visit down here in Naples and look at the options out there, please contact the York Real Estate Group.
Welcome back. Don, let's continue on the subject, the same subject here, but let's go into the contracts.
Sure.
We kind of know what changes there are in the closing or the TRID now. What changes were there in the real estate contracts here?
well, quite a few. I have 7 different contract forms that were modified because of this. The first one, the addendum to sales contract seller financing.
Right.
And this is interesting. I mean, it doesn't come up a lot.
Right.
I mean, I probably get one every a couple of months. You have a seller who's worried about tax consequences of realizing too much gain in one taxable year, so they want to defer their gain over a number of years. Or you have a buyer who's moved here and they're changing jobs and they need a couple of years to qualify for a traditional mortgage, so they'll use seller financing. And because of the Dodd-Frank Act, the Naples Board of Realtors pulled the old seller financing addendum last year. It wasn't available. They didn't know how the law would apply, and they didn't want to get anyone in trouble. Well, they recently came out with a new seller financing addendum that you can now use, and it really only pertains to those transactions where you've got that buyer who's moving here and they're changing jobs and they need a couple of years of employment with that new employer in order to qualify for a traditional mortgage. But under Dodd-Frank now, there are two exceptions, and it's on our seller financing addendum. And really only the first one is used. The seller has to be a natural person. This needs to be the only time the seller has lent money to a buyer in the last 12 months. The seller can't be the developer. There can't be a negative amortization, and that's a loan where if you borrow $100,000 at the end of the loan, you owe $110,000.
Right. Okay.
So it's got to be a positive amortization or interest-only loan, and balloon payments are permitted.
Right.
I mean, sellers almost always have a balloon. It's usually 3 to 5 years. And I've had maybe 6 of those in the last 6 months.
Right.
And in those cases, we would make the seller use a separate attorney, and then I'd represent the buyer. There's an affidavit that follows this particular exemption that the seller's attorney would prepare. Concern was if you violated this particular provision of the Dodd-Frank Act, the seller could be subject to a $500,000 fine. And again, this allows financing from sellers. If you have friends who in the past would lend money from, say, their profit-sharing plan, realtors who would sell a piece of property and lend some of the money to the buyer themselves, like my father used to. Those people are essentially put out of business. They're not allowed to do it. There's no regulations interpreting this yet, and it would theoretically apply to a loan from you to your son, Michael. If you wanted to put a mortgage on his condo or home, wherever he might live. Until we get regulations, we don't know. So the law came from a good place. They want to make people more aware of what their costs are, what they're getting with their mortgage, can they afford it. But it's really comprehensive, might be an overreach, requiring a lot of extra work by you, me, and the lenders, and the buyers, buyers in particular. And their mindset has to change radically if they're getting a loan. No 2-week mortgage closings.
No, there isn't.
They're gone.
Right.
So, as usual, I went too far, I guess, but...
No, you did good. How about in the main part of the contract?
The main part of the contract...
That's an addendum for sales.
Yeah, the main part, what they did was, probably the two major portions of the Naples Board of Realtors contract, the financing contingency has been modified to make reference to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. That's the agency established by the Dodd-Frank Act that's going to supervise and regulate all this. It goes into if a buyer waives this contingency, let's say you go beyond you have a financing contingency and you have 45 days to get your loan and waive the mortgage contingency. If the buyer actually waives the contingency and for some reason there's a change in the closing costs, and the bank will be required by law to postpone the closing and give a new disclosure to the consumer, and that's going to push the closing date out. Well, this contract change gives up to 10 days for them to close.
Okay.
But they have to waive first, which is a scary thing for a lot of buyers when you don't know. Well, if they messed up once and they missed this one closing cost, will they do it again? And if that deposit is a significant amount of money to the buyer or the consumer, it's a tough thing for them to waive.
So on our old contracts, we had a closing date, time of the essence, close on or before the date. Now it can be extended 10 days if something changes.
It can be extended 10 days If the delay is due to and I'll use the acronym CFPB rule, is caused by something to do with the CFPB rule, only if the buyer has waived. Now, a lot of states in this country, they do not have time is of the essence for closing.
Right.
I mean, I'm from Massachusetts. We don't have it there. They don't have it in New York. They don't have it in Connecticut, New Jersey, a lot of places up and down the East Coast. And I don't know about the rest of the country. I think Chicago doesn't have it.
Right.
People I deal with who are attorneys object to it in this contract. We may find at some point that it might be recommended to strike that or modify that in some fashion. But we won't know until we get some more data, we get some actual experience under our belts relating to this new law. We have regulations relating to this new law. We're somewhat in the dark without those regulations.
Right. Okay. Then go to the next thing on your Wall Street Journal ad.
Well, this is, again, since it's new.
That's right.
My wife and I, we get 4 papers in the morning, read everything, and...
No wonder you don't get until 10 or 11.
Oh, that plus nap time. But
just joking.
No, I know. Here is an article that came out October 15th, USA Today, their financial pages, and it talks about mortgage shopping gets less cumbersome. Okay. The goal of the new law is to protect consumers, to give them more choices, to allow them to better understand the true costs of their loan. The lender is supposed to give this loan estimate, which is 3 pages, 3 days after they apply. That takes the place of the good faith estimate. Okay, we already talked about that. It'll disclose things, whether there are prepayment penalties, which is if you pay off your loan early, they might penalize you X% of the outstanding principal balance. It'll disclose whether there's a balloon, and for the general public, a balloon is when your loan is the loan payment's being calculated as though it's being stretched out over 30 years, but the full amount is going to come due earlier than that. That's what we refer to as a balloon. And again, I think probably the most common product out there is a 5-year balloon from lenders. So it gives the purpose of this and disclosure and how wonderful it is, and it makes the point that some closings could take longer. Well, they're all going to take longer.
Right.
I guarantee you they're going to take longer. And then it gets into the minutia of when you're giving somebody a loan estimate, if you give it to them by hand, you start counting from that point. If you email it to them or mail it to them, it's 3 business days after it's delivered, and then the consumer has 3 days to decide. So going back to our 10-day extension of time on the closing, if the numbers switch on the closing disclosure and they have to give a new loan estimate to the consumer, they go 6 days potentially. So again, being on top of it is critical. This article and the government has established a website that you can look up hypothetical payments, look up the repercussions of this kind of loan versus that kind of loan, all with the goal to assisting the consumer. Now, you and I are in the business, and you and I deal with plumbers and electricians and regular people from all walks of life. Personally, I have a hard time getting people to read more than a page.
Okay.
Some people absorb information visually, they'll read it. Other people want to hear it. Some people want to watch it, like they'll watch the show.
Right. Exactly.
The human mind absorbs information in different ways. So, again, jury is out how effective this will be. Some lenders are confused, some title companies are confused, a lot, some realtors are confused. Hopefully, we'll get through it, and it'll end up being a better product.
Yeah. I think it could.
I hope.
We hope, right. So, Don, we're going to take a little short
Sure.
break here, and we're going to be back in 1 minute.
Thinking of buying or selling a home in Naples, Marco, Bonita, or Estero, Florida? Think of the most experienced York Real Estate Group associated with the #1 brokerage in Naples, Downing Fry Realty, which produced $1.9 billion in sales in 2014, controlling 43% of all transactions in Naples. Jim, Michael, and Morgan York make up the York Real Estate Group of Downing Fry Realty. With over $250 million in sales transactions, they can offer you the expertise and trust you want and need in a realtor. Call them today at 239-273-6727 or visit their website, www.naplesyorkrealestate.com.
Welcome back, Don. I think our viewers understand what we've talked about with the new changes. Hopefully they have. I know it's something it's going to take a little time for all of us to understand, but at least it gives them a good overview of everything. But I think what I'd like to do is have them, you discuss how your role is going to change, or what it was before and what it is now, for the viewers that don't know that you are an attorney, obviously, and that you do own a title company, and maybe you can tell them what the benefits are of that.
Well, at the risk of promoting myself, my role, if anything, is increased. My role in the typical real estate transaction is not limited to just the loan.
Right.
And that's all we're talking about.
That's right.
They've taken the typical real estate transaction and added another layer of rules and regulations and statutes and forms on top of what you've been doing for 30 years.
Right.
So more so than ever, if you don't have an attorney involved, you're going to be lost. I mean, you're just flat going to be lost.
Right.
I mean, the fact that I have to come on your show and explain this shows that 10 years ago maybe you didn't need a lawyer.
Right. Now
you're crazy not to have an attorney. Now it's a competitive business, and God knows what it's going to be 10 years from now. But my particular model, since I'm the attorney for Downing Fry, and we deal with a lot of agents, is we don't charge attorney's fees. I don't, unless I'm just representing the seller.
Right.
Okay. Or unless there's some odd title defect that I'm trying to fix. So, I still get telephone calls asking me, Don, how do you draft this language relating to that contingency, and what forms do I need, Don? What contract should I use, Don? Could you please speak to this Canadian buyer on a Saturday and explain the proper way to hold title? And we still receive the contract and initiate communication with the buyer and start the education process if you haven't already.
That's right.
You need to, are you getting a loan? You sure?
Right.
And you need to, who is your lender, and how about using somebody down here? And then going through the inspection process, which we've discussed on prior shows. They always call me on that. What's something that should be in working condition? What's a cosmetic defect? So we're right to the bitter end, and there's usually something at the end, and maybe bitter end was probably the wrong phrase, but right to the end of the process, there's usually some issue, a walkthrough. Somebody took a piece of furniture that was supposed to be included, somebody changed. I have one where they allegedly switched chandeliers. When was it switched? Was it before the contract was signed? Was it after the contract was signed? And then after the closing, I still have it. A lot of these transactions come with warranties. And I had to send a letter out today to the attorney for the seller, whose seller disclosure indicated that there were no leaks relating to the property. The buyer got the home warranty. The home warranty disclosed that there were 3 leaks, and now the buyer's all up in arms, and justifiably so. And so we have to investigate. Is it a serious leak? Is it a minor leak? What caused it? Is it the same cause? What's it going to cost my buyer? Is it going to reoccur down the road? So increasingly, as self-serving as it might come off, I don't know how you do it without an attorney. I mean, I really don't. Now, I don't charge extra. I get random phone calls all the time. Sometimes I wonder whether I'm getting myself in trouble by answering questions to people I don't even know.
Right.
I try to be careful that I have all the facts, that I understand the situation. Then I tell the person calling, well, you should double check with your own attorney
Right.
because there might be something that you're not telling me, or
Right.
you might be from another state. There could be some issue, state planning issue or a Canadian issue that I'm not aware of. So my role seems to be becoming more prominent, reluctantly.
Well, I think that a lot of people don't understand the consumer or even other real estate agents that we are limited at what we can do.
Exactly.
And the same thing with a title company. There's the limitations of what we can say and what things we can do. And that, in our group, the York Real Estate Group, not self-serving myself, but we're part of Downing Fry, is that we put a team together of top professionals, banks, attorneys,
Sure.
and closing agent like yourself, and insurance companies, that we can rely on their expertise because we're limited at what we can say or what we can do. And the same thing with everyone. So we have to depend. That's why, it's so much easier doing business with you, because you can pick up your phone, talk to you on your cell phone on the weekend, and we have a question, or my buyer or seller has a question, they can pick up the phone and talk to you too. It's you don't charge, which is surprising in itself, but it makes everybody happy, and it takes the stress level out of everyone, because things do occur that in this world today, it's not one-page contracts, or
No.
it's
Well, and it's a team. It's a
Right.
team effort, and I give credit to my father. He was a builder and a realtor, and I had to work for him against my wishes when I was a
Right.
kid. And I was always taught that you don't look at the isolated transaction.
Right.
I may lose money on a particular deal, but if I am a part of a team and I help you and the customer get their closing closed, whether I make or lose money on that particular deal is not significant. What you look at is, at the end of the year, are you ahead of the game or are you behind
Right.
the game? And you are going to lose on some transactions. And if you try to nickel and dime people, and this is something I picked up just by being the attorney for Downing Fry, if people are afraid to call me because it's going to cost,
right.
there are going to be more issues and problems because proper advice wasn't given. And then I'm going to get stuck with dealing with it
Right.
later on, and it's going to be 1,000 times more difficult. So I really want the realtors or the customers or the buyers, the sellers to call me, because it's a million times easier to deal with it up front. It keeps everybody relaxed and happy. There should be a pleasant experience. They're buying in Southwest Florida. And whatever I can do to keep people's emotions in check or explain this in a simple fashion, hopefully a less threatening fashion
Right.
than you might read about in the newspaper, explain mold in a different fashion or a radon, then I feel I'm serving the entire person, not just pushing numbers through and trying to get another deal done. And they come back.
Yep,
If it was pleasant, they'll come back, or they'll refer their friends to me. So looking at it in a short-sighted fashion and charging somebody for a call on a Saturday is crazy.
Right.
I mean, you'd never call me if there was a fee every
That's
time.
right.
We wouldn't be sitting here.
Right.
It is a team. Most people don't get that, but it is.
Well, again, I thank you for coming on the show again. And
Thank you for having me.
Don, you're a wealth of knowledge, and
Thank you.
a lot of people depend on you. And again, thank you for coming on.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.